can we please drop all this? Now, it's 2022. I haven't been friends with this guy since at least 2014, late 2013. And the fact that I have to sit up here because we have irresponsible people who call themselves EVPs and couldn't fucking manage a target.
Last week, I talked about the biggest problem with AEW was probably Discovery not re-upping their contract or not paying them anymore when their TV deal comes up. And that a lot of this backstage stuff they were problems, but they weren't going to be the downfall of the company. Well, CM Punk, the guy who shares the same birthday with me, decided that no. He wanted to actually make it a problem that actually could be traumatic for AEW. While we should all be talking about the wonderful pay-per-view that they had on Sunday and the return of one of their most popular wrestlers, we're not talking about that today. We're talking about a post-media scrum, and that's what we're going to be discussing here today in our review of All Elite Wrestling's All Out 2022. I do want to remind you guys, though, first that I always have some free goodies on all of my channels: Rant and Review Gaming, Rant and Review Entertainment, Rant and Review Pro Wrestling, and Wrestling with Finance. Down in the description box below, you can get yourself free stocks from Webull or Robinhood. Those stocks can be worth anywhere from $3 all the way up to $2,200 a piece. You can get fractional shares of big stocks or whatever it is. Definitely check that out in the description box below. If you're not familiar with investing in stocks, you can also check out my Wrestling with Finance channel to get more information on that. But let's talk about what happened with All Out and the investment that Tony Khan has made that might turn out to be a disaster. So first, let's talk about the show. The show was a great show. Interesting on this weekend, watching WWE and AEW both have pay-per-views. In fact, WWE had multiple pay-per-views. I'm not calling them premium live events. They had multiple pay-per-views over the weekend with the Clash of the Castle and the NXT show that they had this past weekend. And Tony Khan mentioned this in the post-media scrum, how this is very similar to what Vince did to the Crockett's back in 1987, the infamous day where Starrcade, which had always been on Thanksgiving night, WWE decided to put Survivor Series on the same night, and that wreaked havoc for Jim Crockett Promotions. Of course, Tony Khan said he's got a lot more money than JCP did, and that's very true, and he's not going to stand for this crap. But that aside, we'll get to all of that stuff later. This was a great show, and it's a very different show from the WWE Castle show, which you can see the contrast between the two different companies. These are two different styles of pro wrestling. And what AEW was able to pull off with All Out was a really good show that, again, had kind of a weak build to it. Before the last week or so, the build was not very good for the All Out show, but everything turned out to work out well. And the people, I'm going to say this about the people who were complaining about the way the main event was booked. The end result is the end result. The end result was that crowd was excited as hell to see CM Punk versus Jon Moxley. It gave an extra added layer to the story of CM Punk and Jon Moxley. And just because some of you did not book it that way, or it's not the way that some of you are used to something being booked, does not mean that it was a bad booking. It actually turned out to be a really good choice and made this match far more exciting than it would have been beforehand. The big highlights of the night, though, or I would say the two best matches, were the Trios Tag Team Finals between the Dark Order along with Hangman Page against Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks, which, man, Kenny Omega and the story of Kenny Omega shedding off the different gear that was helping him out to now being full back to his original self before 2000, and I would even say he's back to being around 2020 level Kenny Omega. Some of the psychology he was doing in this match mixed with a high spot style of wrestling was fantastic. The near falls in this match were absolutely amazing, and they were revolving around Kenny and John Silver. Two of them were, I thought the match was over, and they got me with the split second, very last second, hand right off the mat near fall, which I've noticed the AEW referees on this night, who have been known in the past to botch those near falls, were very good with getting the near falls in and not botching them this time. So that match, if there's definitely one I suggest on the show, it was the Trios match. Omega and the Bucks win the match after Hangman Page accidentally hits the buckshot lariat on Silver. And there were a lot of callbacks to the previous drama with the Elite And but Omega gets the pin on Silver. They are the Trios champions. Omega, and now something that is kind of interesting given what happened after the show. Omega, after the match, goes to the camera and say, "Don't you effing pull away from me." Everybody else try to follow that, which now I'm kind of thinking is a shot at CM Punk, but we'll get into that later. The other big match of the night that I thought was the best match of the night, which was actually surprisingly, I would say is the best match of the night, was the World Tag Team Championship match. Swerve in Our Glory, Keith Lee, and Swerve Strickland defending the AEW Tag Team Championships against the Acclaimed with Daddy Ass. And how over the Acclaimed is. So Acclaimed is been over with me for a long time now. Ever since the pandemic era started ending and I heard the pop for them back at Daly's Place about a year or so ago, I was like, these guys have got it. They're over. And pairing them with Billy Gunn is a brilliant thing because A, the daddy ass line is just funny as hell, and B, they are kind of a modern day New Age Outlaws in the way that they approach themselves and the way they are as a tag team. The match started off as these two babyface teams, but things very changed during the middle of the match and the crowd started booing Keith Lee and Swerve Strickland. Keith Lee even said later on that he was not used to being booed by that many people. That's the first time he's ever been booed by that many people. But the crowd was definitely behind the Acclaim because everybody loves the Acclaim. But that wasn't the main thing about this match. The Acclaim put in some work. Man, they've been a gimmick act. And this is the thing about holding back, which a lot of old school wrestlers tell some of the younger wrestlers, you don't need to go out there and do all your stuff. Do all your stuff when it's built up to something important. And that seems to be the case here with the Acclaim. They pulled out a lot of stuff that we haven't seen from them before now that they're in this high-profile tag team championship match on a major pay-per-view. And I think they made themselves into much bigger... They were already big stars. Now they're bigger stars. And now people are rooting and they have to win the tag team championships at some point in the future. Apparently, again, according to the post-media scrum, that match is going to happen at the Arthur Ashe show towards the end of the month. But on this night at All Out, it was Keith Lee and Swerve Strickland successfully defending the AEW Tag Team Championships. Even though it seemed like the Acclaim were going to win, that wasn't the case. And then after the match, there was kind of the storyline that they tried to get over with Daddy Ass and Keith Lee, who had been bickering on and off during the match, doing the scissors thing, and the crowd did not want Daddy Ass to scissor Keith Lee. And even though they went and did it anyway, because it was obviously pre-planned that they were going to do that as a way to kind of, make everybody still a babyface, but the crowd wasn't buying it. They did not like that at all and booed Keith Lee and Swerve Strickland out of the ring, which Swerve Strickland started flipping them off. But they did work here. I did notice that during the match, Strickland and Lee were working heel against the Acclaimed, who were the clear baby faces in this one. So this was a good one. I don't mind seeing them run it back at Arthur Ashe. There's more about that in the post-media scrum too that I'm going to bring up later. Some of the other highlights on the show, I was kind of surprised to see the Ricky Starks Powerhouse Hobbs match go the way that it did. Powerhouse Hobbs clearly won the match. He had the advantage most of the way through. Ricky's fighting from underneath. I was kind of surprised to see that. What surprised some other people that I wasn't surprised. Well, I was surprised at how it got there, but I wasn't surprised that the Jungle Boy Christian Cage match wound up being a squash. I thought that match, personally, either Christian was going to win very quickly or Jungle Boy was going to wipe out Christian Cage very quickly. And it turned out to be Christian Cage wiping out Jungle Boy Jack Perry, but not the way that I would have even imagined it happening, because Luchasaurus comes out, who at the beginning we think he's on the side of Jack Perry, but instead he actually attacks Jungle Boy and then power bombs him on the steel grating where the pyro comes up, and that must have sucked for Jack Perry because you saw the grid marks on his back, because that pyro, as Taz brought up, those grates are metal and that's where the pyro comes up, so they're probably pretty hot, and there might have been some degree burns. I'm not sure what degree burn Jungle Boy probably suffered in that match, but Luchasaurus brings him back into the ring, throws him in the ring. Aubrey Edwards asks Jungle Boy if he wants to start. JR's like, they shouldn't start the match. Aubrey should just call us off. Jungle Boy, of course, wants to fight. He's been waiting for this match for weeks. Of course, he's not gonna quit now. So he goes into it, falling right into Christian's plan. I'll tell you what, this weekend between the two companies, you saw the same thing kind of play out in both companies. This is very similar to what was going on with Seth Rollins and Matt Riddle over in WWE, where Seth outplayed Matt Riddle to get him overexcited. This one played out the same way in a different way, the same theme in a different way, but I think a little bit more clever, because Christian barely had to do anything. He had somebody else do the work for him. He baited Jungle Boy this entire time into the thing. He hit the spear as a ode to his partner Edge. Didn't get the pinfall, so the fans were kind of excited that Jungle Boy would fight back, but it didn't last long. Jungle Boy did fall to Christian Cage in humiliating fashion. At least his mother got to slap the crap out of Christian Cage for all of us, so we at least got that. The 4-way women's match, and this again is me alluding to the other pay-per-views this past weekend with the Clash of the Castle thing, where those women's matches, the championship women's match at Clash of the Castle was actually a decent match that the crowd didn't give a crap about, and the same thing happened here. The Fatal 4-way women's match, the fans didn't seem to give a crap about. Those women were working their butts off, even with Britt Baker, the most popular woman in the division. The crowd just wasn't feeling it. We did wind up with Toni Storm, as I think a lot of people expected, winning the AEW Women's Championship, as she probably was going to do anyway from Thunder Rosa. So now she is the interim champion. We'll see when Thunder Rosa comes back, and obviously having that match have a blow-off. But the women's division, still AEW, still struggling to get there. But these 4 women in particular, Sheeta, Jamie Hayter, who was the big fan favorite for the crowd of Chicago, Britt Baker, and Toni Storm, they're all heading in the right direction. I still think there's work needs to be done, which then we speak about the other women's match, which was the TBS Championship with Jade Cargill, and I think her best match to date in AEW against Athena. Some people said, and I saw people saying that this was a rout by Jade Cargill, or Jade should have shown Athena. I don't know what match they were watching. Athena basically controlled the majority of this match. She hit Jade Cargill pretty early with her finisher, almost got the pin. She was beating her up most of the match. Jade was walking hurt, but Athena did fall to Jade Cargill, and I will say the best match I've seen from Jade Cargill in her career. And she goes, I think 39-0 now, still TBS champion. Who's going to beat her? Time will tell. The other big thing of note is the second to last match of the night, which was the triple threat, or not the triple threat match, I guess we just call them trios matches now. Miro, Sting, and Darby Allin taking on the House of Black, which might be the end of the House of Black. We haven't heard much from Malakai Black. There's been rumors that he wants his release, even though Tony Khan said a couple weeks ago that he's under a 5-year contract, but maybe that isn't the case. Malakai Black does take the pinfall after having the mist sprayed back into his face by Sting. So Sting kind of playing sort of the Undertaker role here, as being the guy that you go through to get out of the company, which was a trope that the WWF used to use back in the 90s, that like if you were leaving the WWF or they were getting rid of you, Kamala, Nails, Berserker, whoever it was, you went through the Undertaker. That was the guy that was going to take you out. And it's kind of the same, seems to be the same thing they're doing here with Sting. If Malakai Black is leaving AEW, Darby Allin did get the pin. They have been talking about Brody King and Hart and Buddy Matthews joining up with Sting and Darby Allin, and maybe Miro doesn't like that, because Miro didn't really get along with Darby and Sting in this match. After the match has been reported that the House of Black all hugged at the top of the stage. Malakai Black blew a kiss to the crowd and did a bow, which is what you do when you're leaving a territory. We've seen it many times in the past. It wasn't on camera, it was only for the fans in the arena. Tony Khan would not comment on Malakai Black's contract status in the post-media scrum. So I think you may be seeing, depends on what we see on Wednesday night and Dynamite. I think quietly Malakai Black, he might be one of the ones with Triple H back in control of WWE that will go back to WWE. But most of this was really about the main event, and the main event match between Jon Moxley and CM Punk. Like I said, it was an unusual way to do a pay-per-view main event build-up in a feud with the interim championship, which obviously wasn't the original plan anyway. But the way that they did it, I personally felt it worked. And again, the proof is in the pudding. The buy rates were there. The ratings have been there. They did another gate over $1 million. Then the pay-per-view numbers, Tony Khan said, because they had a lot of competition that weekend, the numbers weren't as high, which, you can look at that one way or another as a convenient excuse or as a legitimate reason why, this is only just slightly below last year's All Out, which was one of the biggest pay-per-view buys that AEW had. But, you know, I completely understand it. Spending another $50 on a pay-per-view after you've watched 2 pay-per-views already that weekend, likely for I would say about at least half of the AEW audience, if not more, that's asking a lot. And, you know, you run through fatigue being the last one on the weekend. So there's a possibility of that. And there's also a possibility that people weren't feeling the build to this show, which is, I would say, could be a case. But I will say then, you look at the ratings, they've had the highest ratings they've had since February for the last couple of weeks. So who knows? But the main event did prove to work out way better than I thought it was going to work out. If they had just gone into just building a match and Moxley would cut a promo on Punk and Punk would cut a promo on Moxley and they do face-offs and all this other stuff, I think having Punk lose that match the other week and then the whole speech and the whole build up to this resulted in the match itself being far better, with the Chicago crowd really rallying behind Punk in this match and Moxley just soaking up being the heel in this match, or not being the guy that the fans were for. I think it worked out great. The match was a lot more entertaining than I thought it was going to be. Punk did finally, after being busted open and having Moxley chew on the cut and open it up even bigger and bigger, you knew somebody was going to bleed. I will note, though, that this was the only match on the night we had blood. And it wasn't even Moxley, it was Punk. But Punk did get the win, hitting 3 go-to-sleeps, I believe, in this match. He tried to hit it really early and dust Moxley the way Moxley had dusted him the other week on Dynamite. Didn't quite get it done, but in the end, he did win the AEW Championship. He is now the undisputed AEW World Champion. But that then led to what everybody was hoping for, the lights going out. And yes, MJF made his return. The worked shoot that we all thought, and people were confused, that is it a shoot, is it a work, what happening, is it real, is it not, where is MJF, is he coming back? A lot of people suspected this would be the show. I said it may be this show, and it may be the Arthur Ashe show, but it wound up being this show where MJF made his return. He actually made his return earlier in the night during the casino ladder match where Stokely was the guy under a mask, took the chip down, and I was like, well, wait a minute, why is he getting it? And then a guy with a devil's mask, which would be very poignant and very on the nose, came to the ring and took the chip and went to go reveal himself, but he didn't. He said, not yet. And then we got it, and I was talking to one of my friends. We were texting while we were watching the show, and I was like, I think it'll probably be after the main event, which it turned out to be. They played, which I think this is so good. This is so surreal, and this is a new wrinkle in the way to do wrestling storylines. I love this. It's different. Now, again, there are people who, because it's different, and it's not what we're used to, and it's not in the imaginary book of how you book wrestling, they're like, I don't know if I liked it. I'm like, I suspect you might not like it because you didn't book it or it isn't something you've seen before, but this works. This is a new way of doing it. It's an unpredictable way. It's keeping me on my toes mentally. So they played this clip of a recorded voicemail that Tony Khan left, and as soon as he said, it's hurting the fans, I'll bring you back, even though you don't care about the fans, I care about the fans, and I won't extend your contract. As soon as he said that, we knew it was definitely MJF. And I'll pay you beep amount of dollars, blah, 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 if you show up at All Out. Then we get the CM Punk promo from back in Ring of Honor in the mid-2000s where he talked about, where he quoted a famous quote that the greatest trick the devil ever made was convincing people that he didn't exist. And then they cuts to the guy in the devil mask, and he turns his back to the camera, takes the hood off. You see MJF's hairline, the back of his head, which we all knew it was MJF by the way the hair was. And then I am the devil incarnate. And then he saw this was brilliant. The Burberry scarf go flick on. Oh, that was awesome as hell. As music hits, he comes out and he doesn't say much. He does say the belt's coming home and then makes a motion as Punk holds up the belt. And amazingly enough, in Chicago, right after he won the World Championship, where they've been behind him the entire night, the Chicago crowd with CM Punk in the ring cheers and chants for MJF. That is all really good stuff. The show ended, great way to end the show. All Out was a great show. My biggest complaint about it, though, is the same complaint we're going to have for a lot of these AEW shows. They're way, way, way too long. So that's really the only complaint. If they could have shaved off a couple of these matches And I would say, and they may be doing this because I noticed that Full Gear they're promoting as a 2-night event, Rampage, and then the next night for the actual Full Gear pay-per-view. I would say you're probably better off taking about 5 of these matches and putting them on Rampage the night before and making it a 2-night event, and then the pay-per-view matches you have those other things on there. So yeah, maybe some people be pissed off about the paydays or whatever, but I think at the end of the day the overall viewing experience for us as wrestling fans is going to be better if these shows are 3.5 hours tops with maybe 7 to 8 matches instead of cramming all of this stuff onto a 6 to 8 hour extravaganza between the pre-show, the actual pay-per-view, and then the media scrums, which are almost can't miss. And let's talk about what happened in that media scrum. So to really break this down, and you should watch this, it's on YouTube, you should definitely check it out. I'm sure it's going to get a lot of views. CM Punk comes on, he's the first guest on there. And again, the contrast between this post-show scrum and the very controlled one WWE did with some fake outrage from Seth Rollins is night and day. CM Punk gets out here and he is pissed off. And somebody asked him something about Scott Colton, aka Colt Cabana. We all know the old story about Colt Cabana and CM Punk's falling out because of the whole lawsuit with WWE. This is like 8 years ago, whatever it was now. And Punk is pissed off that he has to answer this question. But then he goes into this long diatribe. It went on forever. Not just about the Colt Cabana situation, explaining everything from his side about the Colt Cabana situation, but then talking about Hangman Page, calling him an empty-headed whatever, then talking about young kids, and it's a shame that he has to deal with this because some people who were given the titles of EVPs leaked it to the wrestling media to get everybody in their little niche online internet community to be against CM Punk. I was thinking at first that this was an angle, but at this point, I'm going to look at it from both perspectives. Let's look at it as if this is real. The number of shots, and it wasn't just one. He kept coming back to it in other questions over and over again as he sat here. Him taking shots at the Bucks and probably Omega 2 and Hangman and the Colt Cabana thing, whatever. But he said he hasn't been friends with Colt Cabana for 10 years, and it's stupid he has to deal with this. And I agree with him. It's stupid. It's what I said the other week. I was like, this is kind of dumb, and this is kind of hyped up by the wrestling media that are just looking for drama, and they succeeded. If this is real again, they succeeded in creating drama, and you kind of got to look at that as being part of the contribution to this. And they're not gonna, if this is real, none of those people who ran with this and made all those videos and wrote all those blog posts are going to take any culpability for adding fuel to the fire of this. But it's completely not on them. It's kind of scuzzy, but that's what they do. I have to say, yeah, if it turned out to be true, which some of the news outlets said it wasn't true, that they didn't hear about this from Nick or Matt Jackson or Kenny Omega or any of the EVPs in AEW, it was from some of the other talent. But Hangman Page is going into business for himself in their promo from a couple months ago before Double or Nothing, Punk giving a receipt. At the end of the day, look, as somebody who shares the same birthday with the dude and we're about the same age, I think I might be a year older than he is, going around calling them kids, I got to work with these kids, and this guy doesn't have anything in his brain, and they couldn't run a Walmart or whatever he said, and airing all that stuff and just being a punk, essentially. Look, an adult doesn't do that. An adult doesn't go and air this stuff out in the public. This is actually what a adult infant would do, is to on a post-match scrum. And, I liked CM Punk for the longest time, but I mean, are we seeing the real CM Punk? Are we seeing the CM Punk that Triple H alluded to, that a lot of the former WWE people alluded to, that Eddie Kingston has alluded to, that Hangman Page has alluded to, that a lot of people have alluded to, that CM Punk is an egomaniac, that is, Cult of Personality is an appropriate song because he is puppeteering a lot of people to be fans of his because he's making himself a martyr, but he really isn't. He's just an egotist. And if it turns out to be true that the Bucks or somebody leaked this to the wrestling media, I can't even call them really media, press. If that's true, then that's messed up on their part. It's messed up if Hangman kind of brought up something he shouldn't have brought up that they talked about beforehand. He knew not to bring up about Colt Cabana during a promo. But again, if you're Punk and you're taking a high ground that I'm the adult and they're the children, don't air that dirty laundry. You don't come back and then go into business for yourself on a show that has not, when you're supposed to be promoting another match and has nothing to do with that. And once again here, the big news story of the night should have been MJF's return, and it has been kind of overshadowed with Punk and his whole rant that he went on afterwards, and there's still more to it after that. The other pieces I want to talk about from the post-media scrum is Swerve in Your Glory. They were talking, and there was one reporter who asked Tony Khan, because of the popularity of the Acclaimed, did he think about doing an audible? Now, this is very interesting. Tony Khan cut him off as soon as he said audible, because he didn't want to do that. Because number one, that's very disrespectful to Keith Lee and Swerve Strickland to ask their boss whether or not he was going to take the titles from them in midstream and change his mind during a match, which would have been crappy if he had done that. And then he's like, all right, he cut it off. And then another guy, the next guy goes, I'm going to piggyback on that and ask the same stupid question about calling an audible, which Tony Khan shut down again, which I think is interesting, because if he's going to shut down those kind of questions, why did he not shut down the stuff with CM Punk earlier on and people asking him that question earlier on? So there's because I think there's a kernel of possibility this whole CM Punk elite thing might be a work or an elaborate work shoot, whatever. But we'll get into that in a second. And then Jericho, another thing I noticed, Jericho took his time to get to the press conference, and Tony Khan's on his phone. And then it looks like he's texting somebody and he's kind of concerned. Now, whether that was associated with apparently what was going on at the same time or not, we don't know yet. But Jericho comes on and he talks about what I've been talking about is like, look, don't screw this AEW thing up. It's a miracle that you even got this chance to do AEW. It is really the last chance for the rest of the wrestling world to actually be able to be a functioning, profitable business where other guys can make money outside of one company. And that one company is already making plans to kind of dominate the world now. So if y'all screw this up, be careful what you're doing. Jericho did that, and then when Jericho left, you could see him whispering some stuff back and forth to Tony Khan as he was going off of the stage, and then Tony Khan answered a few questions. Now, apparently, before and after and during, I'm not quite sure the timeline because I've heard differently, Punk and the Bucks apparently got in a fight. So once again, we've got physical things happening behind the scenes. And Tony Khan was apparently not aware of it, or he was aware of it, he wasn't. It almost kind of feels now watching it. If you remember back in 9/11 when George W. Bush was hearing about the towers falling and he was doing that whole thing for the kids and he was reading a book and he just sat there. Meanwhile, the towers were falling. That was kind of what we saw here. We saw Tony Khan's W. Bush moment where all this stuff is going on and he's not addressing it. But apparently there was a melee, so several people, including Brian Alvarez and Dave Meltzer, who were at the media scrum, reported that security guards and police officers rushed past them to something altercation that was happening outside. And according to a lot of backstage reports, you don't know what's true and this is wrestling. There was a confrontation or a melee or a fight or whatever between the Bucks and CM Punk, and maybe that explains why Jericho was delayed and what Jericho was whispering to Tony Khan about what was going on behind the scenes. So the news about this is going to continue to come out, and let's look at this if it's true. If this is reality, and this is all a real problem in AEW, then number one, I gotta say, CM Punk has proven WWE right. Remember WWE said about CM Punk when he joined AEW, they said, fine, it's their he's their problem now. Second problem is Tony Khan clearly has this fanboy love affair with CM Punk. CM Punk is by far their biggest needle mover. He gets the eyeballs. His YouTube videos get the views. When he's involved in stuff, they get higher ratings. They get bigger buy rates. They get bigger crowds and bigger gates. So that is a problem if that guy is causing problems. And he's involved in one of your biggest stories and your best stories of the year. CM Punk, knowing that and being a champion now, can kind of do, and if he's just going, I'm going to do whatever I want to do, That's not good, and that's not being a team player, and that's not helping out things, and I'm not a fan of that. And if it's real, I mean, I gotta say, with the choice, CM Punk would have to go. Yeah, I know he's drawing you a lot of money and drawing you a lot of eyeballs, but if he's this giant cancer, this giant tumor in your locker room, you gotta get rid of him. And no matter how much he's drawing you, no matter how much of a fanboy you are of his, no matter how much you hug him, Tony Khan, take the blinders off, man. You got to look at this. And I don't like telling somebody else what to do with their business, but it kind of looks to us like he's kind of just allowing it to happen and overlooking it because he just wants to hold on to CM Punk. But think about it like this. If you let go of CM Punk or say to him, which I'm sure Tony Khan maybe Tony Khan's afraid to say this. I don't know. Maybe he's afraid to rein Punk in because Punk will be like, well, fine, I'm leaving. Well, then let him leave. Because he ain't going anywhere. He ain't going to WWE. I can guarantee you that crap. They don't want him back there, especially after this. If this is all real, I think WWE wants to deal with his stuff, especially with Hunter and Stephanie running it. I don't think so. So it's a choice between that or losing the rest. Do you want to lose the rest of the Elite? Kenny Omega's contract is coming up. I did hear. I don't know if he's resigned yet. But do you want Hangman and the Bucks and Kenny Omega joining Cody over in WWE? Plus, Kenny Omega is running your video game division. Plus, those are the guys, despite what CM Punk said about people who haven't been anywhere and haven't done anything, which is baffling to me. Again, if this is real, it's baffling to me. The whole reason AEW exists is because of what those guys did. They did what you couldn't do, what Jim Cornette couldn't do, what Eric Bischoff couldn't. They did what a lot of other people over the last 20 years wanted to do but weren't able to do, and that was create a wrestling company that would be considered major league and somewhat of a competition in a small degree to WWE. That's what Kenny Omega, the Young Bucks, Hangman Page, and Cody Rhodes were able to do. Yeah, you can say, yeah, but Tony Khan's the one funding it or whatever. Yeah, Tony Khan came up with the money, but Tony Khan would have never done that if the Elite were not making the waves they were making in the mid to late 2010s. So if this is real, Tony Khan's got a real big problem on his hands, and this, I didn't think last week the stuff that I heard about was a big problem, but after this fiasco at this media scrum, now I think it's a big problem. But there's the other side of it, because this is Tony Khan, this is CM Punk, this is the Elite, this is AEW. They have not been unknown for taking works or making things that seem like shoots and making them into works. We just saw it with the MJF thing, which turned out, they included it as part of the storyline. Whether it started out that way or not, who knows? But they made it a storyline. So it all seems like it was a big work, which worked at wonders again for MJF, a brilliant thing. So the reaction was great. The viewership was great. This, I don't know. This seems like it's real, but if it is a work, and we are going towards some sort of ultimate Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels kind of situation, if that's what they're trying to kind of manufacture through these shoots that are actually behind the scenes works, I don't know if it's the atmosphere you want around your wrestling company, because I'll be honest with you, after hearing and seeing all this stuff, it kind of made me, I'd rather watch New Japan or WWE right now than watch AEW with all this drama and nonsense. It's an unsettling, uneasy feeling. It doesn't make me feel good about watching the shows. And again, they had a great pay-per-view, and all of the greatness got taken away by this media scrum, and the emphasis and the attention on MJF returning, which should have been the biggest story, is now not the biggest story after All Out. So if it's a work, probably not the best way to do it, probably not the best time to do it. And I guess we're going to talk about this in the near future. What's Tony Khan going to do? Is this going to... I can't imagine, because the Bucks and Omega apparently are really pissed about this, and they are your EVPs. They are high commodities. Is it a choice between them and CM Punk? Are you going to be able to have these guys get along? Do you need to separate them and put them on different aspects of the show? Now, Tony Khan says he basically kind of said controversy creates cash, which is Eric Bischoff's old line. And I could see, given what we saw with the MJF thing, and given the fact that Punk said that he was nowhere near coming back to the ring, and then the next week he showed up on Dynamite, these guys may be setting us up for either the biggest work of all time or the biggest disaster in this generation of professional wrestling and sports entertainment. I'm not sure. I'm going to keep and I don't have the answers. Nobody has the answers except for Tony Khan, CM Punk, the Bucks, and Kenny Omega, and Hangman Page. So I'm going to try to look at this thing as the news comes out about this over the next couple weeks with an open mind that it could be either one. I'm leaning towards that this is just a big problem and that maybe you might have to think about letting CM Punk go. I think the Bucks and Omega and Hangman are much more valuable in the long run to your company than CM Punk is for the box office in the short term. And if those guys leave and then you got Punk who's running the company, basically, are you in another Hulk Hogan situation here with AEW? Is CM Punk the new Hulk Hogan? A lot of crazy stuff. I will tell you, it does spur interest in AEW, but again, I don't know if this is the kind of interest that they want. But I want to know what you guys think about all of this nonsense. What did you think about the pay-per-view? What do you think about the media scrum? And how do you think, if you're Tony Khan, if this is a real situation, how is he going to mitigate this? How is he going to get it back to being a harmonious place to work for? Because if Malakai Black really is leaving after Cody left this year, they're not going to be the last ones. If this kind of stuff continues, there's going to be a lot of other people who want out of AEW because it is turning into the shit show that people said it was going to wind up being, and CM Punk is turning into be the jackass that people said he was. And if that is all becoming true, and if it's turning out that the Elite can't run a wrestling company, if all those things, all those negative things are turning out to be true, the pro wrestling community as a whole has a really big problem. But let your voice be heard about this in the comment box below. Until next time, I will see you guys here for more news, rumors, and commentary on the Rant and Review Pro Wrestling. You can check out my WWE Clash at the Castle review on the channel as well. And until then, I'll see you later. Have a good day.